Okay, gentlemen, Shalom Aleichem, Tanya Inside Out, chapters 42, 43, and 44 today. Okay, we're taking a big bite, nothing particularly complicated, but quite a lot of information. And I've learned this very beautiful way that's going to try and help us remember. This would be really helpful to try and remember. Anyway, so we are right in the inyanim of Ava and Yira, okay? Kavanas and mitzvah. We're talking about the emotions that go behind the mitzvahs, and the Alter Rebbe being, super, super sensitive, has pulled out like nuances in Avos Hashem and not so much in Yiras Hashem, but more in Avos Hashem. Nuance after nuance in Avos Hashem, and basically gives he gives you a whole bunch of different Avos. What's really helpful for us, because we don't have too much Avos Hashem, yeah? Because we're caught up, it's not our fault, but Hashem has made the world in such a way that we're getting pulled in so many other directions. So it's obviously relevant in regards to Avos Hashem, but what's also incredibly relevant is that these Avos give us deep insights into all of our relationships bichlal as well. Okay, our relationship with Hashem is doimer to all the relationships we can have in life are nichlal in our relationship to Hashem. Okay, so just as I think it's called a meta overview, is chapter 42 discusses the root of emotions, which is, anyone has that? Anyone knows where the emotions are born from?
Das.
Yeah. So emotions are born from das, and that's really what chapter 42 is discussing. If you remember, 41 gave us like an overview. Basically, although it said a lot of things, he basically said that Yira comes first. You have to respect the Rebbeinu Shalom before you can love him. If you don't respect him, then the love is not a real love. So that it's like he builds it, although there's so many nuanced ideas, if you look at it like really like kind of block it off and make it binary, it's so beautiful how it's built. Yeah. So first things first, 41 is the beginning of the chapters of emotion. He says, Bichlal, Yira comes before Ava. Finished. Okay. So now he goes in chapter 42. We go into an exploration of Das, how Das basically builds emotion or gives birth to emotion. Then chapter 43, he describes, he also in chapter 42 describes Yira Tata. Then he goes into describe Yira Ilah, Yira Tata, Yira Ilah, the higher fear and the lower fear that are really a continuum that we'll explain, and it's very beautiful how it comes together. And then in chapter 44, he goes into explaining two other kinds of love, which is called, Gabriel, you know the other two kinds of loves? That's like a more kind of expert Tanya question. Nafshi Visicha and Kabara. Okay, those are two kinds of nuances in love that he gets into. And to get a clear understanding of them is, we will, Bezrat Hashem, but it's elusive to most people, it seems to me. Okay, so let's jump in. So the Tanya brings a mimer from the Gemara, and it says, brings the pasuk, what does Hashem want from you? And it says, all he wants from you is that you fear him. And then the Gemara says, what fears a small thing? Milsa Zutrasihi, that it's a small thing. And the Gemara answers and says, yes, it is for Moshe. So it's kind of, I'm not going to get, you could draw that out for a long time. But Kitsa, the Gemara says that Yiras Hashem is a small thing for Moshe. Okay, the Rebbe tells us that the Gemara is referring to the part in us that is called Moshe, the faculty that we have that is called Moshe, which is Das. Okay, so Das is the place where the emotions are born, and for Das to create emotion, is a very simple thing. If you can get to the level of das with something, by definition, an emotion is born. So there's also another Inyan as well. He's talking about the Chochmei Ador, the tzaddikim and the chachamim of the door who have the Masorah, who are giving over to us Torah's MS. Okay, and it's important to know that in this generation, you've got a lot of very lovely, wonderful people giving over beautiful ideas, but I don't know how many people are giving over Mamash Masorah. Mamash I know there are definitely people giving over Masorah, but there's a lot of people who aren't giving over Masorah. They're giving over what they've learned from Sfarim, and that is Hoshev, but it can't replace Masorah. It can't replace Masorah. So ideally, we will be learning from the mouth of our Rebbe, and he would have learned from the mouth of his Rebbe, and he would have learned from the mouth of his Rebbe back to Moshe Rabbeinu, and that would be called Masorah. Whereas when someone's extracting meaning from a sefer, it's not quite the same thing. It's actually it's actually a very different thing. So anyway, so he underlines that basically in this chapter. The Rebbe explains that learning from Sfarim is a kind of, it's so funny to say it in this generation, it's a kind of b'diavad because we don't have any much other options. But I'm wondering, I mean, from my experience, I know it's like it sounds like crazy to say this, but it might be better listening to podcasts and like listening to Shirim. Listening to Shirim on YouTube has its own problems, but just listening to Shirim over reading Sfarim, if the Rav is Kashor to Masorah, in my opinion, I've never seen this anywhere, but from my understanding, that would be that's adif to actually learning from Sfarim. The problem with Sfarim is it's too much about you. You can put your spin on things, whereas when you're actually listening to a shir, there's much less interpretation. There's much less opportunity for interpretation. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. Okay, so the Rebbe basically he spells out the what we need to understand something with das. He calls it breaking the goof and breaking the neshama. Okay, to know something with das, to break the goof, again, always refers back to disidentification with the things of this world. That's, by the way, tangentially, why the sexual aveiras are so chomer. Because the sexual aveiras are to do with Yesod. Yesod and Das are on the same line. When we're over in aveiras of a sexual nature, part and parcel of the aveira includes a level of identification with that aveira, which does not happen with other aveiras. So I mean, for example, a person who's over on the Issa of Mishkav Zocher will, in many cases, refer to himself as that Aveira. If you were to say, what are you or who are you, that would be a good chance that would be part of his, a very, very real part of his identity. Okay, so that's so for knowing Torah with Das, to being able to take ideas of Torah with Das, first things first is we need a strong filter on the internet. We need, or get the what's that thing called, web cover, which I have, where my wife sees all the websites, like my Rav sees all the websites that I access, etc. So there has to be a separation from Arias, from Priestess, from any level of sexual impurity. Basically, I suppose you could just define it as tikkun a bris. Okay, shmiras a bris, tikkun a bris. That is a prerequisite for knowing stuff with Das. To disidentify from things that aren't kadosh is a prerequisite for re-identifying with things that are kadosh. Okay, so that's what the Rebbe calls as breaking the goof. Then breaking the soul, the breaking of the neshama, is basically putting huge energy into these ideas, going back over them again and again and again and again and again and again and again, and get them to just. I think the key to the whole thing. I saw this one of these books. What's that book called? Atomic Habits. Yeah. So he spoke about one of the reasons why Michael Jordan became who he became, which I mean, it's just a basketball player, but how he became the best basketball player was he was able to break past that barrier of boredom. He just didn't get bored doing the same thing again and again and again. And I can't stress enough how choshev that is in being koine Torah, in understanding Torah in your das. You have to go over it again and again. You have to listen to the shir, and then as the shir ends, instead of the way that YouTube works with now you've got all these other shirim that it's suggesting, click back and listen to it again and finish it, yeah? And you're like, get back again, listen to it again, yeah? And then do it again and again. And then you'll start becoming it. And then it just becomes like for you to go on after enough time for you to go forward, you're already like a little bit, I think I should listen to it again. Yeah. You just stop asking yourself the question. This is the key. What do I think? If you don't ask yourself that question, it's a segula nifla to be able to go over these ideas again and again. Like, what do I, because you say to myself, what do I think? Well, I don't think I want to do that again. I'm bored. I can't, I'm restless. Just don't ask the question. Just go back. Like the minute you start thinking out of the cold mikveh, you won't go in. Yeah, just jump straight in. And then you're in there and you're like, this isn't so bad anyway. It's the same thing. But that's a prerequisite for knowing things in Das. Go over it again and again and again. I can't stress that enough, mamash. And it would change your life for the better, much, mamash. Okay, so now let's just discuss quickly Yira Tatar and Yira Ilah. Now, each one of these things have got 3 names, okay? Gabriel, you know the names, the other 2 names for Yira Tatar?
Years hate.
Yes. One more.
No.
Yiras Chitsonius. So Yira Tatar goes by 3 names. Yira Tatar, the lower Yira, Yiras Chait, fear of sin, and Yiras Chitsonius, or Yira Chitsoni, the external Yira. Okay? Yira Ilah goes by 3 names. Yira Ilah, the higher level of fear. Yira Pnimi, Yira Pnimius, an inner level of fear. And then Yiras Boishus, which is like an embarrassment, a fear of shame. Okay, now the difference between the Yira and the Ava is that the Avas aren't really on a scale. The Avas are describing different things. Yira Ilah and Yira Tatar are on a scale. It begins with Yira Tatar and it ends with Yira Ilah. Okay, and that is not to get confused with Yira Sa'oinesh. The Alter Rebbe does not talk about Yira Sa'oinesh at all in these 10 prakim of Avas and Yiras. He doesn't define Yira Sa'oinesh as a valid Yiras Shamayim. That is not called Yiras Shamayim. It's a fear, but it's not Yiras Shamayim. It's a fear of getting hurt, which has got nothing to do with God. So he doesn't discuss Yiras Oinesh. And Yiras Roimimus, which the Ramchal talks about, and a lot of the tzaddikim talk about, that would be sticked in probably with Yira Ilah. Okay, but he doesn't use the word Yiras Roimimus. Okay, so what is it? So it's basically a scale. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful to understand this. Okay, when I exist 99%, and I'm aware that the Rabbeinu Shalom, that forget even the Rabbeinu Shalom, that I'm aware that there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears, that I'm under surveillance, but it's about me, and I'm being watched by him, but it's me being watched by him. So basically, you could say I'm 99% and he's 1%. That's the very beginning of Yira Tatar. It's a self-containment for the fact that he's to some degree present, watching me. And it's a bit weird when you have to go to like Yirsa Oynesh, when you think about it. Like the Bodenstrom's watching you. To be scared of punishment, you have to assume that he's watching you and that he's then going to punish you. Isn't it just enough to assume that he's watching you? That's the so anyway, I'm not gonna get into that. But anyway, so yeah, that was there's a funny joke, Chabad joke about the Chabadskas who went on a Shabbaton, and at the end of the Shabbaton, the hotel owner spoke to the guy in charge of the group, and he said, "I'm just absolutely amazed at how well behaved they all were. It's never like that. They were so well behaved. Thank you very much." So the guy says, "I know." Well, basically, they know that God's watching and he sees everything. And if they step out of line, he's going to tell the Rebbe. I thought it was a funny joke. Anyway, Gary, you missed that, yeah? Unlucky. Okay, you catch on the rerun. So Yira Tatar begins at this level of just I'm being watched. I'm being watched. Not even by the Melech Malchei Malachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but just like Yochanan ben Zakkai gave a bracha to his Talmidim, that you should have the fear of heaven like Basar Adam, that you're just being watched by a simple person who's not a king. Yeah, that's the very beginning of Yiras of Yira. That's called Yira Tatar, and that's why it's called Yiras Chait, because it stops you from doing Averas. Why is it called Yira Chitzoni? Because the way that you do it, so to speak, is that the way that you build this recognition of the fact that you're under surveillance, excuse me, is that you meditate on a very simple idea. Okay, we've spoken about this before, but the idea is as follows: that you don't have any year of a person's goof. You're, what's the word? Not self-containment. What's the word? When you feel like you're under surveillance, what's the word?
Self-conscious.
Self-conscious, thank you. Your self-consciousness comes from their consciousness. And for example, if they were to fall asleep in front of you, you would lose your inhibition. You're not inhibited in front of. There's even a level of inhibition in front of a 4 or 5-year-old, of a 3-year-old, even a 2-year-old, a young child. There's a level of inhibition, but you're not inhibited by their goof. You're inhibited by their consciousness. Because if they were to fall asleep, like I said, you would not be inhibited. So this is the key to everything: is the only way to a person is through their goof. That's how you get to a person. Without the goof, there's no one there. If they're there as a spirit, how do you know? So the way you get to a person is the goof. But the goof is just the prosdor. It's just the corridor to the person. And in and of itself, it's nothing. So you are, what did I say? Not intimidated, what's the word?
Self-conscious.
No, I said another word. Not intimidated. You are self-conscious. Inhibited. You are inhibited by the consciousness. So you could say like this: a person's made of a body and a soul. You are inhibited by the soul, but the only way you know there's a soul is because of the body. And the Rebbe goes on and gives you a very, very big, I mean, he says it's a side point, but this is a huge thing to know, is that this world is called the Levushay Hashem. Hashem is the neshama of the world. The world is his levush. The world, so to speak, is his body. Not that he has a body, but the world is his body, so to speak. So he says, just like you're cognizant of your friend's soul through his body, so too just looking at this world should bring you to this lower level of fear. The level of fear that allows you to contain your actions, to behave correctly. And that's why it's called a Yira Chitzoni. Because you're using the Chitzoni to extrapolate to the Pnimi. And he says you have to be margil yourself. You have to accustom yourself to this. You have to habituate yourself to thinking like this. Talk to people about this. This is the world is the Goyim already say this in this generation. They call it, I think they call it Gaia or Gaia or something like that. Yeah, like the world is like the manifestation of the infinite consciousness of reality. That's really what we're saying here. The world is a I just said it. The world is a manifestation of himself, Mamash. There's not two things going on. That's the side of Tchias Amesim, when his name will be one, he will be one, his name will be one. Your goof is called your name. So when we actually ascend from the level of, which is really the Inyan of Purim, when we ascend from the level of a chiluk between Hu Ushmoi, yeah, the Inyan of real of when we ascend to the level of recognizing that Ruchni, that Hashem is not Ruchni, which is what we're trying to do in this door. This is our job of this door, is to ascend to understanding that Hashem is not Ruchni. He's not Ruchni, he's not Gashmi. Hashem is Hashem. Ruchnius and Gashmius, that is a Nivra. So Kolzman, we're stuck in this paradigm of Ruchnius and Gashmius being two separate things. Yeah, that's he and his name are two separate things. When we ascend to the level of Etzem, beyond Ruchnius and Gashmius, and we realize that Ruchnius and Gashmius are one, that's when he and his name will be one, and that's Tchias Amesim, meaning the separation of the neshama from the goof, of the etzem being from the name, is just an illusion from our very goyish perspective. That's a side point. We could talk about that for a long time. Okay, so what's Yira Ilah? So Yira Tatar, it begins at the level of I'm 99% and Hashem's 1%. He's looking at me. Now that obviously goes up in Madregas. I'm 80%, he's 20, I'm 70, he's 30, I'm 60, he's 40. The minute I become 49 and he becomes 51, we've entered into Yira Ilah. And this is called Yira's Boishus. When he becomes more real to me than me, now I start to feel a little bit embarrassed, because what right do I have to be a little blimp? How'd you say it? Not a blimp, a blip, a blip. I'm a little blip in his perfect infinity. That is tucker embarrassing. Just like when I go to Chicago and I wear my Strymon on Shabbos, yeah, I'm like one Strymon in front of, in a room full of like 300 businessmen with hats, without hats, whatever, and I'm like the one Strymon. That's embarrassing, yeah. That's a self-consciousness. That's what Yiras Boishus is. Yiras Boishus is that Hashem has become so real to you that your existence makes you feel a bit uncomfortable. So now that goes from I'm 49, he's 51, all the way through until he's 99, I'm 1. I don't think it covers 100 and 0. That would become a different thing. But there has to be an element of self-consciousness. It could be a teeny weeny element of self-consciousness, but there has to be that for it to be Yira Ilah. And that's why it's called Yira Panimi, because it's not coming from me looking at the world. It's coming from Hashem's reality. I've ascended looking at the world, and I've now moved my perspective, so to speak, to the panemius of the Rabbanu Shalom, and that's now overwhelming me. And so that's Yira. That's basically the picture that the Alter Rebbe paints of Yira in chapters 42 to the end of 43, to the middle of 43. You with me? Yeah, it's a sliding scale, and you can remember it by remembering that at the beginning of Yira Tatar, the lowest level of Yira is I am 99%, and Hashem is there watching me. And as I become less and less real, and he becomes more and more real, Then the tipping point is when he becomes more real to me than I am. Now I start being inhibited. And a good way, just a good avoider for this, I'm sure you're ready for this, but some people might freak out at hearing this, is just don't sit there with your feet up. Don't, like there's a time and a place, okay, when you're on the couch, but be, sit up straight and be aware that you're sitting in front of the Melech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You don't learn the Torah like you learn, like you don't open the Torah like you read a newspaper. Yeah, you don't sit there like, like a king reading a sefer. That you don't even, and then it gets to the point where you'll even feel it will come to the point as well to Shem where the halacha, the annoying halacha of you should either get dressed in the bathroom or under the covers. It will get to the point where you don't really have an option. You can't, you're just too conscious of like, how can I can't do that in front of the boy in Shalom. Yeah, so these kind of avoiders, just being self-conscious and being very mechubadik in your demeanor and acting like he's there watching you, and it's pasha poil, and it will start helping you become start helping you actualize your Yiddishkeit as well. Okay. And just to quickly close that up, is the Rebbe brings the Mishnah in Avos that says, in Avos it's actually written opposite. It says in ein chochma ein yira ein chochma, but the Rebbe adjusts it backwards. He said, or maybe he had a different girsa. He said im ein yira ein chochma, im ein chochma ein yira. So where'd you begin? So he says the first level of yira is yira tata. So this first level of just consciousness that he's watching, that leads to chokhmah. Chokhmah now means you're asuk in Torah and mitzvahs. The asik in Torah and mitzvahs is goyrem the yira ilah, the higher yira, where he starts to become more real to you. What do they say? Fake it till you make it, yeah? That's one of the most Jewish statements I've ever heard in my life. Chazal are big into that. Fake it till you make it. Pretend like he's mamash in front of you. Keep pretending, keep pretending, keep pretending. And then before you know it, he will become a Metzias. He will become a real Metzias. Okay. So now, this is so helpful. We have to have a big Hakasa Tov to have Manis for this. Because he didn't say it in one place, but I've put it together for a lot of his shirim. And it's like this. The two first loves that the Rebbe speaks about is what's called Ava Rabba and Avas Oilam. And one is Kulu from Hashem, and one is Kulu from me. Ava Rabba is a gift from Hashem, and it comes if your yira is b'shleimus. Ava Rabba is a gift from Hashem 100%. Avas Oilam is from you 100%. That's his boiness bringing it out. Now I'm going to skip to the next parak. He speaks about two other loves called Nafshi Ivisicha Belayla. Belayla. That my soul thirsts. And another one called Kaboa, like a son, that a son who loves his parents more than himself. Yeah. Now these are hybrid loves. They are partly inherited, like the Ava Rabba, and partly what's the word? Aroused or not activated. What's the word? Catalyzed inside, yeah. So they've got a level of, they come from Hashem, they're natural, they're innate to you, and a level of his boinaness that is necessary. Now this is mamash moedik. Those four loves can be categorized as the four primary relationships that a man has. Now don't get caught up in your own personal relationships, because I can basically guarantee you that your relationships with each of these people that I'm going to talk about are not going to are going to be different to how what these relationships are talking to. So don't get too caught up. But they are. It's very helpful. There's the relationship that a man has with his sister. There's a relationship that a man has with his wife. There is a relationship that a man has with his father, and there is a relationship that a man has with his son. Don't start asking me about daughters and mothers and cousins and workers and subjects and talmidim. And there's lots of other relationships as well. But this is really helpful to remember these four loves. Okay, the love between man and his sister, the love between man and his wife, the love between man and his father, the love between man and his son. The love between man and his sister is Ava Rabbah. Because the love between man and his sister comes from above. You don't have to generate that love. She's your sister. You love her. It's just you. There's no, you come from the same place, and that relationship is lemala min ha'olam. It's not kashor to the world, bichlal. It's just there. She's your sister. Again, whether you love your sister or don't, that's irrelevant. That doesn't matter. But this is the inyan, okay? So that's the sister. The wife, on the other hand, I mean, you're from Mars and she's from Venus, yeah? She's a man, she's a man, you're a woman. She's a woman, you're a man, yeah? You can't get two more different creatures than that. Literally. I mean, think about biologically, we have like more in common with like a male, you know, like with a male ape than we do with a female of our own species. They're so different. After being married for many years, you realize how different they actually are. For the first like 15 years of marriage, I was always trying to like, you know, tell her how wrong she is and that she's just, you know, she needs to pull herself together and become more normal. And after nearly 20 years of marriage, I'm starting to realize that she's just a different Matthias. Yeah. So there is no latent, that's the amazing thing about marriage. What's the foundation of marriage? So I would imagine that every secular person would say the foundation of marriage is love, yeah? No. The foundation of the marriage is called a kasuba. That's the foundation of marriage, a kasuba. Love is not a foundation of marriage. Bichlal, you have to bring love to the marriage. That is absolutely not taken for granted. Love was created to enhance marriage, not marriage to complement love. You get married for whatever reasons you get married, but not for love. Now you're married, now it makes sense to love her, because otherwise there's the other options don't make sense. But the foundation of marriage is a kasuba. The foundation of marriage is marriage. It's binary. Within marriage, you have good marriages and bad marriages. You have passionate marriages. You have passive marriages. You have water marriages and fire marriages. You have intelligent marriages and emotion. You have all these different kinds of marriages, yeah? But they're just different kinds of marriages. There's just the marriage. It's binary. You're either married or you're not. Okay, there's the inyan of a suffix marriage, but that's still just because we don't know if you're, so the Rabbanan will go l'chumra on both sides. But you're either married or you're not married. That's, by the way, if anybody's hopping this, that's the inyan of rising above Ruchnius and Gashmius. That's the inyan of relating to Hashem on the level of Etzem, where Ruchnius and Gashmius, where shame and Etzem dissolve. When you get to that level of stopping thinking about the qualities of marriage, and you're mechaber yourself to the binary metzias of marriage. I'm married, finished. Just like this is my child, finished. They get good grades, they get bad grades. They're cute, they're not cute. They're annoying, they're funny, they're whatever it is, yeah? That's all shades within the relationship. But the relationship is binary. You're either my son or you're not my son. That's it. So this is the point, is that this love, Avas Oilam, is kulu on your shoulders. You have to generate that love. Unlike Ava Rabba, which is your sister, that comes part and package of you just love her. That's from out of your control. Whereas the love of the wife is there is no love taken for granted. Your love for your wife has to come through a voida. Be'ezus Hashem. So, this is an important point. I think it's quite easy to cut. You'll probably forget it, but it's very important. Is that love and oineg, love and pleasure, are two separate things. Yeah. Oineg, we know, is the very shoresh of the neshama, and love is way down in the midas. You have oineg, ratzon, seichel, then you have midas. Yeah. So love is not conventional. Love is not pleasurable. What's pleasurable is the actualization of that love. So, for example, you love someone deeply and they go away on a long voyage. Is that pleasure? There's no that's pain. The pleasure of love, of conventional love, is being with your beloved or doing for them. Being with them, right? Yeah, being with them and doing for them. That's the pleasure of love. The love itself isn't a pleasure. Haraya, when they're not with me, it's painful. So the love itself isn't a pleasure. Avarabba, the love itself incorporates oineg. I don't know because I don't think I've ever had it. But Avarabba is actually a pleasure. The love itself isn't oineg. We don't know what that means. You have to talk to like a big tzaddik to find out what that means. But I can talk about it intelligently. So the actual love itself is a pleasure. By us, the love itself is not a pleasure. It's the activating or the fulfilling of that love that is the pleasure. Okay, so Ava Rabba is in itself, and it's also called Ava Patanugim. It's also a love of pleasure. Okay, that's a very deep point, and I don't, like I said, I don't have any experience of that.
Is it appropriate to make a comment now if I have one, or just
yeah.
Later?
No, make a comment. Just as long as you don't disagree.
So
I'm joking.
Yeah, so the deepest, well, of course, you're always welcome to disagree. The deepest concept of love that I have is that there's a good feeling that you have when you pay attention to someone. That is love. It's the feeling, the good feeling you have when you pay attention to them.
That would be what referring to as being with them, yeah.
That would be being with them, because you could also think about somebody, you could think about them even when they're not with you. Just thinking about them gives you pleasure.
But
it's easier when they're with you. It's easier. But even when they're not, you could.
Again, you're not getting love from the pleasure is not coming from the love. The pleasure is coming from the actual love itself. It's now the thinking about them, looking at the picture of them, etc. That would be, you hear the point? Is the love itself is not pleasurable. It's the experience of them with the love. Whereas this love that we're talking about, again, I haven't got any like experiential thing to give you on this, but this love is the love of the big tzaddikim. The actual love itself is an actual pleasure. You with me?
I hear you.
Yeah, I don't like, again, this is all very theoretical because I don't really know what that means, but I'm just giving you over what I've learned from my Rebbe. But that's why Ava Rabba is also called Ava Patanugim, because it incorporates a pleasure. The actual love itself is a pleasure. It doesn't need any qualification. It doesn't need any corresponding action or speech or thought or etc. That's clear?
Okay.
Okay. I appreciate the horror though. Av's Oilam, on the other hand, is through Bina and Das. Okay, it's the conventional love that we've learned about, where you basically think about whatever does it for you in regards to the Ribono Shel Olam. If you want to think about how he's the source of all pleasure, how he does such nice things to you the whole time, how he's given you such a life, or how he's so, how the world is just so beautiful, etc., whatever turns you on. Yeah, you can be misboining on that, and the deeper you go, the more it becomes real, and that generates love. That's just, we've learned that many times. Okay, so nafshi ivisicha belayla is now the love a parent has for his children. Now, we're gonna do a 180 on what we've always learned, because for the minute I entered into Aish Torah, I was always told that the parent loves the child much more than the child loves the parent. Okay, and that's not wrong. Yeah, but the Rebbe is going much deeper and explaining it opposite. The love that a parent has for a child is, for all intents and purposes, a selfish love. It's a hemshech of yourself. And when we're talking about the love that a child has for a parent, we're not talking about a kid. We're talking about a fully grown person nursing their old age parent to death. That's a true love. That is the truest, and that's why that eventuality that a lot of us have to deal with at some point is saved for much later in life in general. That is one of the final nisyonis of a human being, that level of totally selfless love.
To some degree, there's a sense of I owe it to them. That's not selfless.
You're right, but that's not really the source of the love.
They did it for me, and I have a car satov, and v'chulu.
Yeah, so you could say that, but and again, don't get caught up in the actual relationship. Like I said, like with your sister, with your wife, all these things. What the point is that the Rebbe is hinting to the idea of the bittul that you have in your source. The bittul of the being in their source. That's called the love called like a son, kabbalah. It's not predicated on the fact that, I'm not saying people nurse their parents to death maybe with a feeling of guilt or whatever of Karasatov, but we're talking about the idea of the child is feeling a complete bittul in the parent, because the parent is the source of who they are. Nafshi Visicha says, I love you like my life, meaning not more than my life. I love you because you give me life. I love you because really it's a selfish love. I love you like I love my life. That's not I love you like the source of my life. These are the two, this is the nuances between Nafshi Visicha and Kabbalah. That Nafshi Visicha is the love that a parent has for the child, and they're very important to have. All of these loves are important to have. It's not like you have one or the other. You have access to all of these loves. Why is Nafshi Visicha more? What's the milah of Nafshi Visicha over Kabbalah? The love of I love you like my life over I love you like a child. What's the milah? Is that the love that we have for our children forces us to get up in the middle of the night. Meaning, you can do the hardest thing for you for that love. That love, because it's a self-love, is really where all of the avodah takes place. The love kabbalah is more of a kind of water love. It's, although you would give up your life, you wouldn't be able to exert yourself to such a level as you can for the love of Nafshi Visicha. So nafshi v'sicha, that love that we have for our children, is the love that allows us to exert ourselves for our children. Not in the same way that we don't exert ourselves for our parents in that way. But ultimately, the love that he's talking about here, kabara, is a more selfless love than the energized love of nafshi v'sicha. So we need all of these loves. It's not like you have one and you don't have the other. We're talking about different. The Rebbe is describing nuances in these different loves and helping us get to grips with where they come in. So there is a benefit to a selfish love. The benefit to a more selfish love is the fact that it's gonna motivate you to a deeper service. Whereas the kabbalah, which is a higher and more pure, more selfless love, is not necessarily going to motivate you in the same way as nafshi v'sicha. Okay, so we'll finish off with this very important point. We've said a lot of stuff, but to finish off is like this. In the final analysis, I can put a mezuzah on my doorpost as well as Moshe Rabbeinu can. There is endless madregas to Avos Hashem and endless madregas to Yiras Hashem. But the equalizing factor is Lamaisa. And with all of the feelings of love and fear that you have, if you don't put the mezuzah on your door, if you don't say the 6 words of Kriya Shema, the love and the fear are there to elevate the mitzvah. But the mitzvah is ikka. It's always important to go back to that. And that's because it's binary. The mitzvah, there aren't madregas in the mitzvah. There's maybe b'diavad, okay? But b'diavad is still your yotzi. You're either yotzi or you're not yotzi. Even b'diavad is yotzi. It's binary. That's like going back to the relationship. You're married, you're not married. Oh, it's a good marriage. It's not a good marriage. It's passionate. It's dynamic. It's dull. It's boring. That's all madregas in the marriage. The marriage is binary. You're married or you're not married. Just like the mitzvah is binary. The mitzvah was chal, the mitzvah wasn't chal. That's where the relationship is. That is the relationship. That's the relationship. The emotions are nuances within the relationship. So and this is the real takeaway here, is within every relationship that we have. Yeah, I'm not talking about like with your cab driver and stuff like that, but with the real relationships we have with your wife, with your children, with your parents, with your brothers, sisters. Yeah, you always need to be cognizant of the binariness of the relationship. That needs to be at the forefront of your mind. And that will get you through the difficult times. If you don't have that binary married, not married in the forefront of your mind, we are married, nikuda, period. If you don't have that, then when there isn't love and there isn't nice things going on, you're going to be, there's trouble ahead. Whereas if you can stay focused on the actual metzias of the relationship, that will, in most cases, be able to take you through the difficult times. And that's the same inyan with the mitzvahs. Stick with the mitzvah. The Maisa mitzvah is ikka, and then obviously we want to be motivated with Av and you. Want to be bringing the mitzvah up, but never lose track of the fact that the Maisa mitzvah is really the whole thing. The Av and Yira are nuances within the thing. That's why the mitzvah is called the oif, the bird, and the Av and Yira is called the wings, because a bird without wings is a bird. You've got mitzvahs to a bird without wings. It's Sar Belachayim. If it's not if it's not a trophy, you can be muck with it, you could eat it, yeah? Wings without a bird is just a bunch of feathers. It's nothing. So that's the real takeaway by the end of chapter 44. Is it's actually the beginning of chapter 44 before he gets into more nuances. He just says, remember that at the end of the day, the Misa is equal amongst all of us. And that's a really very comforting, that's a very comforting thing. When you really think about that, it's really, really comforting to think that in Hashem's eyes, the Misa mitzvah, because it's no one, and I'll tell you, I think this is what annoys me, that the statement about Rahmana Liba boy, Hashem wants the heart. So what people think is that means that you should be like doing the mitzvah with, like this. I'm not saying you shouldn't be doing the mitzvah with a lot of energy. Yeah, you should. But Rahmana Liba boy is really referring to the fact that he wants you, not your emotions. That's nichlal in the you. The emotions are a chetzonius dicker part of you. But Rahmana Liba means he wants you. He wants you to be identified with him. He wants to be the heart of your life. He wants to be the Rosh Pinah of your life. The raison d'etre, can you say that? He wants to be the center of your life. That's called Rahmana Liba boy. That means you've given your heart to him. And Nichlal in that is also the emotions. If you've given yourself to your wife, then part and parcel of that is she gets your emotions as well. And she also gets your intellect. She gets your machshava and dibur maisa. She gets your ratzon. If you give yourself, if you just give her your love, yeah, then what about you? Love dafka. Okay, we touched on a lot of ideas here that really need hours and hours of discussion. But anyway, so that's chapters 42, 43, and 44, in my humble opinion. B'ezrat Hashem. Shbi Zoicha. Okay. Any questions?